topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, and I'm here and excited to be with you. So I want to share some exciting news. It came from one of our audience. Yes, her name is Jenny. And what Jenny shared was that she had never thought about going ahead and thinking about just having a designated 1 hour of kindness circle. So she decided to sign up for a Human for Habitat. And she decided that she was going to go and learn about not only, how the houses are pulled together, but be part of that. And here's what I want to share. Jenny, I'm so proud of you, and thank you for sharing your story. So she signed up for one, and now she has signed up to volunteer every month for several hours. So Jenny, kudos to you. And I'm so excited for you because Jenny also shared that as she was helping to build those houses, now she can do so many things around her own house that she is so thrilled and filled with joy. So thank you. So that's the power of being in Kindness Circle. So as I always invite you, be sure to take that 1 hour of your time and spread it out over the whole month. Think about it. Even if 50 million people just in the US alone were to do that, it would be 50 million hours. Can you imagine the power of that momentum that could bring and the movement we could create? So here's the thing, folks. Do it and then share your story with us. And if you're okay, give us your first name, last name. We are happy to give you a shout out. Jenny asked us to keep her last name undisclosed, so we didn't share. But Jenny, I'm sure that as you listen, you are going to be thrilled that you are inspiring so many other people and so many other folks to do what you have done. So thank you to each and every one of you who have got our books, Expert to Influencer and the Entrepreneur's Garden, because they are going to help you position yourself as the person you want, regardless of where you are in your life. Have that great relationship and bring that joy in your life. And also become the influencer, just not an influencer with numbers of likes or views or any of that sort, but an influencer who impacts and leaves a lasting legacy. So if not got you our books, please do so. Help us support the message and let's spread the message. And also remember that the partial profits from these books do go to kiva.org. And let's get started with our show today. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's awesome to have you. So usually we get started with a moment in childhood. Do you recall any moment or a person from your childhood that still is as fresh for you as if it was yesterday?
Well, I have several. Some impacted me in a really great way, and some impacted me in a way that created a low sense of self-worth. So
Oh,
I think everybody has had that
Mm-hmm.
experience, right? I had a family of origin where there was a lot of conflict and a lot of shaming. But my grandmother, my mother's mother, who I saw maybe once or twice a year, was so unconditionally loving. And I remember one night when I was really struggling, I was 12 years old. I was cleaning the dining room table after a family meal, and my grandmother was helping me. And she said something along the lines of, Andrea, it doesn't matter, what anyone else thinks or says. I love you. I believe in you. And basically she just sort of sprinkled magic in my heart by the way that she energetically showed up and the comments that she made. It was beautiful.
Wow. It's so beautiful, right? A few words, and it can be either a bomb to a kid's heart and
Yeah.
fill them with their hearts, or for that matter, for anyone, right?
Right.
Versus when you sprinkle that bitterness that can pull people down.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah.
So as you grew up, were there any desires, dreams that you had?
I had the dream of being on stage like the Brady Bunch. I wanted to be on stage. I wanted to be seen and heard and affirmed, right? Which is what all of the characters on the Brady Bunch were, and which I didn't have going on in my family of origin. I didn't feel seen, I didn't feel heard, and I didn't feel affirmed. So, watching that family on TV, I felt compelled to be on stage, and it has impacted my life forever. I ended up starting to be in front of the camera when I was 14 years old, and I worked as an international fashion model all over the world starting at age 16 for a decade. And it was it was interesting because I do work with families, and the lack of getting what we need as children can often drive us to the careers we choose, to the relationships we're in, the way we parent, the way we show up for ourselves. And in this case, for me, not feeling seen, heard, and affirmed as a child, being in front of the camera on stage was what I did to nurture that part of me that didn't get my needs met as a kid. And it wasn't always in such a positive way either. I mean, being in that industry as a fashion model at age 16 and traveling all over the world by myself was an opportunity for all sorts of crazy things to happen, and they did.
Mm. So tell us, how did you get into the fashion? Because at a tender age of 14, so many
Yes,
young girls have got no clues where they want to go.
I
And
do. Yeah. Yeah. So, well, when I was 12 years old, I was in a photography class at my school. I was in 7th grade, and
mm,
I chose to be the model, not the photographer. And when the photographs came back, I looked at myself, and I had never really seen myself as a model. I didn't even necessarily know what one was. I just knew that what I saw on print looked good to me. And over the next 2 years, I started playing with makeup and wearing my mom's clothes. And then the conflict in my family home was so great, especially between myself and my father, that
mm,
I had been put in therapy and was medicated at age 12. And by the time I was 14, the conflict was so great that even my therapist didn't object to me leaving home. And the world outside of my family home felt safer to me than the world inside my family home. So I ended up moving in with a girlfriend, and I used to take the bus after school to a modeling agency where I worked as a receptionist at age 14. And then I met a makeup artist who was he liked to dress in women's clothing, and he taught me how to dress and to model and to do my hair and makeup. And as a result of that, I put together a portfolio with the help of some photographers that were local. And he put me on a Greyhound bus when I was 14 years old to Chicago, where I auditioned and got the cover of a beauty magazine when I was 14. And that was, what really launched me, was his belief in me, was my desire to be seen and heard and affirmed. And that launched me into a career where at age 16, I got a contract to go work and model in Asia. And then after that, I lived in Manhattan and worked there for almost a year, and then moved to Paris and worked there for a year, and then came back to the United States and lived and operated from the Chicago area, where there was a lot of catalog work, and ended up in Los Angeles eventually, working toward an acting career.
Wow, that is impressive. So on one hand, I'm sorry that you went through what you went through. And on another hand, it just makes me so proud of that 14-year-old who took the matters in her hand and carved a life out of
Right.
what was like mess, she made. Oh my goodness, that is just amazing. Thank you for sharing that and being so vulnerable.
Yeah.
So Andrea, you said that, I mean, on the outside, it looks like, oh, you had it, you got it, and you did it. You mentioned that there were some things that could go awry. So would you be open to sharing that?
Some things that could go what, did you say?
You mentioned that some things could go in the wrong direction. They could take a wrong turn.
Yes.
When you are so young and outside. So there may
Right.
be young girls, right, who may be hearing about this and like, oh yeah, I can do that. So it's
Right.
also important for them to see what can be the other side.
Absolutely. I started self-medicating at a very young age with substances. I started smoking weed and engaging in cocaine. I was a lingerie model primarily. I worked with Elite Models, which is a very well-known agency. And I needed to be very slender, have that hourglass figure. And so as a young person, I didn't feel like I was, I felt like I could do anything, right? And so I did. I stayed up late and partied. I dated rock musicians. I dated the bass guitarist from Pink Floyd. I worked, and I worked and I partied hard. And it wasn't until I was 21 years old and my younger brother died of a drug and alcohol related car accident that I started to change my ways. I made a commitment to myself to give up the drugs, and I did. It was 6 years before that I was really, doing a lot of drinking and drugging, and it wasn't healthy at all, for sure. I mean, there are girls that don't do that, who are models. Girls like Cindy Crawford. She and I did some lingerie modeling together for a company called Magnin, which is a very old but well-known and well-loved department store. And it was nationwide, and she was constantly in that catalog. And I used to go work with her at Victor Skrybnevsky's studio, and she would be doing her homework. She was going to college, and she had a whole different mindset, a very business-minded woman. And we can see her successes today, that, she made the decision to take care of herself. And she had a very strong family as well, which was helpful, I think, to guide her. I think she was really encouraged to put school first, even though she was making it big as a model, which was great for her. Very big contrast between the two of us, I'll tell you.
Well, you turned it around. That's what matters. And what would your message be for the young ones?
If you feel compelled to self-medicate, to party, to use drugs and alcohol, to in a way that makes you feel at ease and more comfortable socially and with your peers, that is a sign that there are there's a need for you to get some emotional support, to go and talk with a professional about what it is that makes you feel like you can't socialize without those substances. A lot of times when we grow up in homes where we are not affirmed and we are not acknowledged, where it's not safe to feel vulnerable, it's not safe to talk about our feelings. We don't feel secure, and we end up believing that we don't have a lot of self-worth. And it might not be conscious, right? For instance, my dad told me when I became an adult and we ended up having some conversations about what life was like for me as a child. He said, "Well, you were the most confident woman, a young person, excuse me, and had so much high self-esteem." And I said, "No, Dad, I was driven by this sense of not being good enough, to prove that I was desirable, to prove that I was wanted, to basically fit in to somewhere, because I didn't fit in at home. It had nothing to do with self-esteem, and he said, "Well, you traveled all over the world." And I said, "Yes, because I was seeking a place to belong, not because." I mean, it was a combination, right? Like there was a part of me that definitely loved the excitement and the glamour and all that stuff. But I think under it all, I was driven by this sense of, I don't feel safe in the world. So I did self-medicate. I don't feel safe with other people because I didn't feel safe with my main family of origin. So why would I feel safe with other people, emotionally? And so self-medicating for somebody is often a sign of, or it is a sign of having trauma, emotional trauma. There's different kinds of trauma, right? Sometimes people think of trauma as like big T trauma, where, there's been serious physical violence or sexual violence, which is very common in our world, unfortunately. But at the same time, just regularly being told, shame on you. How could you, with these critical tones of voice and eye contact that, the way people see us when we're children causes our mirror neuron, if people understand what that is. But we do have something called a mirror neuron in our brain. And the way that we're looked at physically by other people tells us a lot about what our value is, right? And so we have work to do. If we're self-medicating, it just simply means that we need to go in and heal the part of us that feels unworthy.
Mm-hmm. No, you hit a point that's close to many, many people. And here's the thing, that regardless, wherever you are in your life, whether you are 10, 15, 12, 60, 75, our self-worth is important. And as you mentioned, it's important to be seen, heard, and affirmed. And at the same time, as you mentioned, that if you're experiencing any of the things, it's important to seek help so that you can anchor within yourself. You can create that grounding so that you are able to live the life that you deserve. So now, as you grow up, you had a turning point. What followed later?
Well, the turning point again was my brother's passing. And I reevaluated the life I was living in Chicago and decided that I was going to go back to Asia and model, because for some reason I felt like I was at home there. I felt loved there. When you're a Caucasian young person in Tokyo, you are revered to some degree. And I felt really revered while I was there. So I left Chicago, went back to Tokyo, hung out with the bass guitarist of Pink Floyd, who was doing the Wall tour at the time at the Budokan, and I was really excited to see him there. And then when he and I both returned at separate times to the United States, he asked me if I would fly out to LA and meet him there, because he was doing bass guitar on one of Madonna's albums. And I said yes. So I came out to LA, and After he left, I just decided I could never go back to Chicago. I was in love with the temperature and the beauty out here, and I've been out here ever since. So that was the beginning of a huge turning point. But I ended up working here as an actress and as a model, and I met the father of my children. He was 40 years old, and I was 27, and he was exciting and charming and handsome and successful. But what I didn't realize was that he was somebody who was struggling with substance use disorder, and
Mm.
that didn't come out. And I didn't even realize what substance use disorder was, even though my brother's accident was related to drugs and alcohol. It was never acknowledged. It was just a car accident that he died from. But it wasn't until I was in my own recovery that I recognized, oh, no, for over a year, he had been struggling with cocaine himself and alcohol from the time he was 15 or 16. And he passed when he was 17. So when I met my husband, the father of my children, I just thought he was just this charming, gregarious, fun guy, right? Who liked to enjoy wine. And it wasn't until I saw him drink and black out, that I recognized there was a problem. But I still didn't know anything about addiction. And it wasn't, until I went to therapy and found out, that that's what he was dealing with. And in fact, when I started going to the 12-step rooms of Al-Anon, I worked that program, the Al-Anon program, and I actually think it contributed to the destruction of my family and my relationship with him. I work a totally different approach to family recovery. I don't believe in letting our loved ones hit bottom. I don't believe in letting them and detaching from them. It's not a program that helps to heal the family unit. It actually causes polarization and conflict. And we can't afford to do that these days, especially with fentanyl being in the works, because letting your loved one hit bottom when, 10 minutes from now they could go out and smoke weed that was laced with fentanyl is a death sentence. You can't afford to do that. But even back then, we're talking 1989 or 1990, the listening to the anger in those rooms. And I actually went for 5 years to Al-Anon because that's what I was told to do by my therapist. And if I could go back and wave a magic wand, I would undo all of it, because today I have a great relationship with my former spouse. We've been divorced for 30 years or 32 years. And I know that if I had used the tools that I have today, things would have turned out differently, because he is sober today, and we've been a close family for at least a decade, even though we're no longer together.
And that's what counts. You have had a rough time. I can't even imagine being 21 and hearing about your brother. And it's really sad what you went through. And it's your brother inspired you to kind of turn around. And life is all about learning and finding opportunities in those obstacles. So as you continued, what were some of the lessons you learned from your acting and modeling and your time with your ex-spouse?
Let's see. Well, some of the lessons I learned were unhealthy. For instance, I learned that as long as I looked good on the outside, and I think I learned that from my mom originally, because she always, was just very well dressed and well made up. But, I learned to put on a pretty face, if you will, and just pretend that everything was okay when nothing felt okay on the inside. Nothing felt okay, And my former spouse ended up, because I was so critical and shaming toward him and his substance use, instead of applying kindness and compassion and learning and educating myself about the fact that he was also somebody who was terribly traumatized as a young man in his family of origin. If I could have come to understand that he was somebody who really needed a lot of compassion and love, and so did I. Our inner children, the two of us together, were really traumatized, and we traumatized each other as adults, operating from the wounded children inside of us. And I guess looking back, I can now see those were lessons I learned, but I didn't learn the lesson until I found a healthy way of recovering, right? And so I didn't learn the lessons at the time. He ended up having an affair with somebody who was 24 years younger than him, and left me and my two daughters, our children, for that relationship, because he was driven by this wounded part. And when I attacked him for what I felt was his choosing alcohol over me and the kids, it was almost like I felt like he was having an affair with the alcohol, and I was constantly berating him and shaming him. And again, wish I would have known what I know now, right? Of course he was going to go have an affair. Of course he was going to leave. Of course he wasn't going to stick around for feeling attacked and shamed, which is what his little boy felt from his family of origin, because his mother was very mentally ill. And so, I learned, like I said, to just look pretty and shut up. And then when I got into Al-Anon and started vocalizing what I was hearing in those rooms and attacking him, he left. And I went through 7 years of being a single mom, which was really hard. And the wounded child in me, who was so afraid of being abandoned and was abandoned, right, by my husband. I didn't have the capacity to be emotionally available for my own daughter's emotional needs, which were huge, right? Because their daddy left, and now mommy feels insecure because I didn't have a formal education. And that's another thing I would tell a young girl is, go ahead and get yourself a formal education, even if you become an actress or a model, because that gives you a sense of stability, inner stability. And you mentioned a few minutes ago feeling anchored. Oh my gosh, I spent my entire life not feeling anchored. Bless you. And it wasn't until my oldest daughter, who became a heroin addict, and then was facing 6 years in prison by the time she was 19. It wasn't until she looked at me one day and she said, "Mom, I might be the heroin addict, but you're the one with the problem." And she was right. And it was her going to the extreme that she went that caused me to finally pay attention to what my broken, wounded self was doing, which was hurting myself and the people I quote unquote loved, right? But I didn't even know what love was. I didn't feel love for myself. I felt neediness, toward other people, and engaged in relationships from a needy point of anchoring. So, it wasn't until my daughter got sober, and she's been sober for 13 years now, bless her soul, because she helped.
Yeah, definitely. Congratulations. I'm sure you're very proud of her.
Yeah.
And you brought up really a good point that regardless, it's not just physical. Let's focus on emotional trauma. And there's so many people who experience that. How can they recognize, first of all, that they have emotional trauma? I know you one time you did say for the young girls, but let's say people are adults.
Right.
And what can they do to overcome it and heal it?
Well, that's a great question. And so I never realized that I had emotional trauma. And it really wasn't until I started doing this work with a therapist and a family recovery coach that I started to recognize that, maybe there's maybe I am the common denominator here. You know, maybe my relationship as a sister, my relationship as a wife, and my relationship as a mom of people who struggled with substance use disorder indicates that I have a problem, you know, and and I think that we can identify that we are struggling by internally, like we have experienced emotional trauma when we look at our life. Is it chaotic? Are our relationships chaotic? Do we feel emotionally safe inside? Do we Are we hyper reactive to people? Do we have a hard time tolerating other people's emotions? Because all of these are symptoms of not feeling safe with our own emotions. People, like, for instance, my father, who shut me down emotionally, he was very dictatorial, but that was a protector inside of him. That was a protective part because he didn't feel safe with his own emotions. And how could he tolerate somebody else's emotions, his little girls, um, when he didn't feel good about having strong emotions himself, because he also was shut down as a child from his parents, right? And so these are generational patterns that get passed along, and I did the same with my children. My children didn't feel safe emotionally with me. So does that answer your question, like how you can identify? I can't hear you for some reason. What happened?
Let's explore a little bit more about how people can be safe with their emotions, because you mentioned that when you're not able to tolerate other people's emotions, when other people's emotions make you uncomfortable.
Mhm.
So tell us a little bit more about not being safe with your own emotions.
It's a process of
Mm.
there's a process of being able to identify, y- paying attention to when I feel triggered is really important, and then having tools to emotionally regulate myself is so important. When I go off the handle, when I fly off the handle at somebody, and I'm much better at that today than I've ever been, it's a sign that when I lose patience with other people, it's a sign that I am not emotionally regulated, because our natural state of being is to be calm. It's you know, we were birthed into this life experience, um, with a sense, I think, of wonder and a sense of curiosity. And when we don't have that sense of wonder and curiosity, we tend to be reactive to other people. We tend to judge them, even children. Like, I know I was impatient with my children because I expected them to just fall in line, but that's not who children are. And they're curious, and they want to you know, have time to be who they are. And so when we are not able to tolerate other people's emotions, it's a sign that we are not able to emotionally regulate ourselves. And so the key is to find a program, work with a coach. For myself, it was working with 2 coaches. One was a therapist coach and one was a family recovery coach, to learn breathing techniques, to learn emotional freedom technique, which is a tapping, you know, protocol to help calm myself down, so that I don't take my emotions out on other people and damage the relationships, and damage my I have 5 grandchildren, and I know for sure that there are times when I want to react and snap at them because old programming lives inside of me. But thankfully, I can catch myself and breathe through it, or excuse myself and go have a conversation with myself in the bathroom if I need to, about the fact that they're just being kids, and I am needing to be a really safe adult for them so that they grow up with a sense of feeling affirmed and a sense of well being.
Mm. Very powerful. You said that emotions are not just going to go away because we are naturally programmed to have emotions. It's what you do with them is what it counts. So
Yeah.
can you share with us a couple of breathing techniques that people can
Yeah.
use to tackle those? So like first thing you said, figure out whether you need help. Second is like, once you know, become mindful of them. And third, let's listen to some of the techniques.
Well, so one thing is called square breathing, and our Navy SEALs are taught this technique.
Box breathing. Yeah.
Box breathing, right? So you breathe in to a count of 4, you hold for a count of 4, you exhale for a count of 4, and that's the technique. And you do it 4 times, right? Breathe into a count of 4, and you hold empty. Excuse me. So you breathe into a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4, and then hold empty for a count of 4. And you repeat that 4 times. And my coach used to say that she would do it before she even got out of bed in the morning, just so that she centered herself and prepared herself sort of for the day from a calm place. So that's a really powerful technique. Another technique is tapping. And there is a protocol for tapping. You can learn it on YouTube, actually. It's emotional freedom technique. There's basic emotional freedom technique videos on YouTube. And it's a pattern of tapping certain points on your face, neck, and underneath your arms and on your hand, that our Navy SEALs and actually our military is trained with emotional freedom technique, because it's been proven that it reduces trauma, anxiety, depression, physical pain, and it will calm the autonomic nervous system. So I highly recommend that people seek those training videos on YouTube.
That's powerful. So tell us, sounds like your daughters are doing great. You have got grandchildren, and
Yeah.
so where are you at right now, and what's next for you?
Oh, well, thank you. I am currently rewriting my book, which is called Revelations of a Bad Mom, which is really the journey of my own recognition of what I wish I would have done differently as a parent and prior to becoming a parent. But I interject a lot of the stories from my own childhood and how they shaped my belief systems about my value and about who I am. And so that's what I'm working on, but I'm also working on a one-woman show, which is called Revelations of a Bad Mom as well. And I work as a crisis case manager for companies that hire me, but also private individuals who have a lot of crisis going on in their lives, and who are dealing with addiction or mental health issues in the family and want to come from a kind, compassionate approach and want the family system to heal. So I work with families for that purpose. I also am an intervention intern for the Arise intervention program. Um, and that's a beautiful, gentle, kind way of doing an intervention on families and on individuals who are struggling with addiction. And I am a family recovery coach for families who want long-term strategies to communicate in ways that create connection rather than create polarization.
Mm, that's beautiful. Unification of families can, as you mentioned, that I still see that, like, when you mentioned about Cindy Crawford, that she made her career as a business and she had good, strong family support. So having that strong family support can make a huge difference in anybody's life. So, like that, instead of polarization, bring in the unification. How can people get in touch with you, and where can they find you?
Okay, so people can go to my website. There's a link there for anyone who's interested in having a 45-minute talk with me, who are seriously wanting recovery for themselves and their family. My website is andreaarlington.com. And yes, and there's a way of contacting me through email on the site as well.
And do you have any one or two last wisdom nuggets for our audience.
Yes, and that is, you've got to get support. I tried for years to navigate the challenges I was having with my daughters and my husband, from my own wisdom, which I didn't have any experience dealing with substance use disorder, didn't even know what it was. But when I finally got support from professionals who specialize in family recovery and addiction recovery, my whole life turned around. My daughters' lives turned around. Don't try to do this on your own. And as a parent, thinking that I could just sort of shame to tame my children, if I just demanded them to behave and perform in ways that I thought would work, related to their substance use, was not helpful. I really needed help. And like I said, it wasn't until I got help that everything turned around. And it is possible, because when we do the work ourselves, everything in our lives gets better.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for sharing your journey and being vulnerable. Appreciate that.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, listeners. And I'm sure that some of the stories have resonated with you. Know that we all are perfectly imperfect. There is no perfect in anyone. So wherever you are at, pick up right where you're at. There's no wrong time. There's no right time. The right time is when you start. And remember, it's okay to fall. It's okay to fail. It's not okay to give up on yourself, because life is precious and it's a gift that deserves to be honored. So reach out to us. Let us know how we can support you and continue the kindness circle. Let us know your stories and we'll keep on sharing. And thank you, Juan, for making the show technically possible. So be well and take care until next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.